Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. This time round, we're checking out a mod by the name of Preacher. Now this one is interesting for a number of reasons, the first of which being that this originally began life as a musical project. Each level was intended to have a song with lyrics performed by a band playing for the duration, but somewhere along the line that idea fell by the wayside. The remnants of the idea are still there in the title screen and the intermissions between levels, but for the most part the sounds that you'll be hearing during the course of a level are much more, let's say, traditional sounding. Another interesting aspect of Preacher is the fact that the character you play as is essentially a fanatic straight out of blood, and that extends to the voice lines, as you'll have heard at the very start of this video, and a few of the weapons that you'll be able to wield during the course of this mod. Case in point, the Tommy gun that I'm currently wielding. In terms of the maps themselves, the opening one reads very much as a statement of intent. You'd expect the opening map to be a little bit of a gentle introduction to what the rest of the mod has in store for you, but here things ramp up pretty quickly. And even then, with the benefit of hindsight, you do realize that this is the gentle introduction for Preacher, because things do get more intense from here on in, both in terms of enemy encounters and level layouts. That said, I never found this opening map to be in any way cruel. Surprising, yes, especially with several of the ambushes that you'll endure during the course of it, but as I've said, it's very much a primer for how you should be approaching the rest of it. You'll be leaning quite significantly on the quick save, that is a given, but you'll also come to appreciate the generosity that the levels have with regards to items such as ammunition, armor, and health. They say that variety is the spice of life, and the same seems to be true of the maps that you'll be playing during the course of Preacher, each one you visit having something just a little different going on in comparison to the one that came before. And this variety also extends to the way you can attack these individual maps themselves. You never really seem to be pinned down to attacking them from one particular route or direction. This map, for example, which is overwhelmingly vertical in comparison to the last one that we played, has a teleporter that will land you in different spots depending on what direction you approach it from. Now, initially, such a mechanic may seem quite disorientating, and in truth, it is, but as you spend more time within the map itself, as you discover its circular nature that seems to naturally lead you to the location that you need to go, regardless of what direction you pick, you can't help but admire the construction of it and just how tightly woven maps such as this actually are. And it's a design philosophy that seems to wind its way through all of the maps here in Preacher. If I had to pick something out as a great example of what Preacher is capable of, I'd certainly hold up a map like this. This is called 40 Days in the Desert, and when you get down to brass tacks, it doesn't really do anything shockingly different from what the other maps in Preachers do. It's got those same elements that I brought up previously, that element of non-linearity, the freedom of choice in terms of what angle you wish to attack things, and the only thing you're really going to be coming up against with one choice or another is potentially the intensity of the encounters you'll be asked to deal with, but ultimately, as before, it will quite effortlessly lead you back round to where you actually need to be. So naturally, this leads to the question of, well, what is it exactly about this particular map that I enjoy so much? What makes it so special in comparison to the others? And in truth, it's down to a collection of smaller flourishes that litter the map itself that I just feel are pretty damn neat. For example, I really like the central gimmick of the Spider Mastermind in the elevator/tower shaft. It will raise or lower depending on what part of the map you are yourself to continuously apply pressure. I'm also a fan of the mapping flourishes that are more superficial than anything throughout the course of this map. For example, at the start, there's a construction that forms the shape of a spider which you can pass underneath in order to get to the teleporter. But as you move deeper into the level, you start to notice more elaborate designs that incorporate that kind of thing. For example, this section here isn't just the shape of a centipede or whatever you want to call it at the front, but it actually continues around the curve of the corridor to the back when you look at it on the auto map, and that stuff just endlessly impresses me. The kind of stuff you can honestly sit back and admire if it wasn't for all the projectiles currently careening into your face. I guess what I'm trying to say here is it's one thing to make a satisfyingly designed map, to make something that genuinely feels nice to play through. It's another thing entirely to make that map truly memorable, and I honestly feel that Preacher is most certainly a successful marriage of those two things. These maps all have their own little bit of personality to them, while also retaining that nice solid core of consistency across the board. I'm going to be honest with you guys though, at this point I feel like I'm going to start sounding like a broken record because I'm finding it legitimately difficult to come up with serious criticisms of Preacher because I just had such a nice time with it front to back. I mean, sure, as you get deeper into it, it does get a heck of a lot more challenging. Some would say that the maps towards the back end do start to feel a little baggier in order to accommodate just the sheer quantity of enemies you'll be dealing with, and on that front, I know a lot of people may be turned off by the almost slaughter-wadish level of enemies kicking around. Slaughter-wads, by the way, if you're not well versed on the term, tend to be maps that just have absolute metric crap tons of enemies lurking around and function more like wars of attrition than anything else. But I feel, as previously stated, that Preacher strikes a very good balance when it comes to quantity of enemies and the support items that you can use to keep yourself going throughout the course of the levels. And circling back around to the construction and layout of the levels themselves, if you ever do feel too overwhelmed by a collection of enemies in any one particular section, there is usually ample opportunity for you to retreat, try a different route, or just find somewhere a little quieter on the map for you to gather your thoughts and figure out what you need to do next. That last point in particular is something that helped to keep me relatively sane during the course of Preacher's final and certainly most challenging map. Everything up until this point honestly feels like practice in comparison, because this is Preacher at its most expansive, at its most multifaceted, at its most numerous, certainly in terms of monster count, and you are just let loose and told to deal with it. As far as final challenges go, this one certainly feels like it meets the criteria, turning all the aspects of the preceding levels pretty much up to 11, but as a result somewhat sacrificing the enjoyability and the easily read nature of those preceding levels too. This is something that will frustrate you, but I can forgive that because it feels like a culmination of everything that's come before. That this isn't meant to be an easy ride, it's the last goddamn level. So, you know, get to work. You may have noticed that up until this point I haven't really spent much time talking about the weaponry of Preacher, and the reason for that is because any changes here are chiefly cosmetic. The BFG, for example, is swapped out for this staff, but still functions in the same manner. The plasma gun has been swapped out for a spell book, which has you shooting jets of flame from your hand, which admittedly looks very cool. The pistol has a slight tweak to it, and the Tommy gun is effectively the chain gun. The shotgun and super shotgun, however, remain untouched. You'll also notice that there's a few cosmetic changes when it comes to the various items that you'll pick up too. You'll get crucifixes in place of armor, because the Preacher don't need armor, he is protected by faith. You'll also see that prayers replace energy cells for the prayer book and both the staff respectively, and all in all it comes together to provide a nice sense of cohesive theming for the entirety of Preacher as a whole. But if I had to pick something out that certainly amused me the most in terms of cosmetic changes, I would certainly point to what they did to the Soul Spheres and Megaspheres, which are now Jesus Spheres. And just to seal the deal, they let out a chorus of Alleluia whenever you pick them up. So, would I recommend Preacher? Nah, it's alright, I guess. Seriously though, I would really recommend this one. It is very clear why this is the recipient of a Caco Award, which is rich coming from me, considering I comprehensively shat all over Maskim Zool, another Caco Award winner, but, you know, that just means you have to take my opinions with a pinch of salt. But then again, in my experience, the proof of the mapping is indeed in the playing, and there's certainly more levels here than I've been able to showcase in this here video. So if you're interested in giving it a whirl for yourself, the link, as usual, is in the description below. While I'm at it, I'd like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so very much for supporting the channel and for helping to make content like this possible. If you're interested in lending a hand yourself, maybe you'd like to see your name in the credits, or maybe you'd like to gain early access to my videos before anyone else. If that's the case, you'll find the link to my Patreon page also in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mod you'd like to see me cover in future editions of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.